Oh,
there it is.
Oh,
Yeah.
Merry Christmas!
Merry
This is our
Christmas.
first post-Christmas episode.
It's belated Christmas to everybody. Yeah. It's,
Still waiting. Hoping we get an Oscar nominee.
into studio or something.
I don't know. Like I feel like anything. I feel like everything we do is award worthy.
Yeah. Oh, for us. Yeah. I think we're putting out the grand content that everyone is desiring.
I'm building towards a Lifetime Achievement Award. I think that's really that's the ultimate goal.
That is a worthy goal, I think, and I think you'll get it. I'll be left out, but
thank you.
I appreciate that.
You. Thank you.
Up-to-Date Cinephile. I think it's episode 12.
13, whatever. I don't know. I can't count that high.
But we're there was some. I think we wanted to tackle some more movies, but then as I saw them, I was like, some of them aren't worthy of discussing.
Of our attention.
Of our attention.
Of our auspicious gaze and analysis.
Yeah. One being I think we're passing over is Matthew Vaughn's Kingsman. I don't know if you saw that.
I know. I didn't.
Don't.
I haven't.
Don't
I
do
have
it.
not enjoyed any of those movies.
Yeah. This one's the worst of it.
Ooh, that's a rough.
Yeah.
I mean, I feel like those movies are just like, I'm not sure what they're supposed to be.
Well, I think they're callbacks to Bond, and so
yeah, but they're not. They're like.
It's
like,
Bond
whatever they're trying to do that's supposed to be funny has not worked on me.
Well, I mean, it's the opposite. In the post 9/11 world, Bond responded to Bourne and wanted to be serious, wanted to be dour and bleak. And then midway through, we're like, oh, we need a little bit of silliness. So Skyfall, Spectre, got a little tone variations that were strange. And Kingsman, the Kingsman, is taking it back to the heyday of British exceptionalism and attitude, and the Kingsman has that all the way through. It's so strange. Like it has.
Well, see, that it's so strange is kind of a selling point for me because I just expect to be bored by.
Oh no, it's boring.
Like that.
I mean, it's
strange
boring.
and boring is a rough combo.
Strange. The through line is that we must embrace violence in order to.
Well, I agree with that. I'm into that.
Well,
although I mean, I've come out on this pod hard pro sex. I think we need more sex in movies. We certainly don't need more violence in movies.
There actually was a lacking of sex in the Kingsman.
Yeah, they just give you so much violence and no fucking.
Yeah.
And I want sex in movies. Violence if it's good.
Yeah.
Which we're going to talk about was at least what I thought was some really good violence in this episode. But
we'll get into it.
Well, I liked some of the violence in the movies that we're going to talk about.
Okay.
But so we're talking about as opposed to review. I like to review movies I haven't seen. I feel like that's more interesting on some level. I'll give you my review. Or like at one point I thought we should record reviews of movies before we saw them and then review our pre-review to see if we got it right.
Meta contextualizing.
But no, we're just going to talk about two movies we did see.
Yeah, we
The
should.
Matrix. Which one are we on? The
Resurrection.
Resurrection.
Yeah.
Because it was Reloaded, Revolutions, and Resurrection. And then we're going to talk about the new Macbeth movie.
New recitation of Macbeth, done by Joel Coen of the Coen brothers.
Yeah, not Ethan Coen, not Ethan Coen.
No.
Perhaps the greatest of the Coens, the filmmaking Coens. But I guess we'll start with Matrix, right?
I think that's the big
usually
one.
the way we go.
Yeah.
A spoiler-free review to start.
What a bizarre movie.
You want to go off, King?
Just a little bit. What a bizarre movie. It potentially had a lot going for it. For me, it loses its steam and gets a little muddy and gets a little too complacent in the nostalgia it's sort of at first commenting on and then embraces, which I found very weird. And I have some ideas of what would have made it better when we get into spoiler content. I don't know. So this is The Matrix for me is a pretty foundational film. I think for any people our age.
Yeah, I mean it came out. Well, I'm old.
Yeah, you're only slightly older.
I mean, did you see this when it first came out in the theater?
It was very close. No, maybe not in theaters, but it was video rental for sure.
I saw this movie probably 6 or 7 times with my friends in the theaters. It's the last movie in my life that I will ever do that with.
Yeah.
I can't imagine maybe over the course of my lifetime I might see a movie 6 times in the theaters,
Sure.
but in a month, no.
Yeah.
So yeah, I mean, this movie was huge. I mean,
Yeah.
it came out kind of at the perfect time for me. I was 18 years old. I mean, me and my friends were obsessed with this movie. There was none of us that were cool enough to have seen, like, whatever the Hong Kong action is that it kind of rips off and precedes it.
Well, I mean, and it's so interesting because it is that. What I actually miss, and that's not evident in this movie, is the lingering, wide action pieces where they allow those martial artistry to breathe, which is very punctuated in the original in several sequences, especially the training sequence with Neo and Morpheus. And that's missing in this one, quite to its detriment.
Yeah, I think that the violence I like is actually in the next movie.
Yes. Yeah,
but
yeah.
I thought the action, some of the sequences were better than others.
Yeah,
There were some action sequences that I quite liked and thought were interesting. And then there were others, especially towards the end, that were a little more kind of just standard. And
Yeah.
I thought, like, well, that's not very Matrix-y.
No.
Like, you might as well go for it, right, with
I
the
agree.
whole thing. Well, you go on when you're
Well,
ready.
so
Then I'll
so Matrix
chime in.
is so interesting when you go back because, like, what is the Matrix?
What is the Matrix? Are we in it right now?
Are we in it?
A little evidence that we are.
Theory?
I wanted to. I'm going to interrupt you for a totally non-important reason.
No, it's fine.
Which is that on the way over here, I got evidence that we're in the Matrix. Which is that I got a telemarketer call. They switched it to where you get it from your own area code, but this was even more devious because it came from my parents' area code.
Oh.
And I don't. They must be tracking me.
They must.
Because I'd be like, oh, someone's calling me from northern Wisconsin.
Yeah.
Right? So the Matrix, we are in the Matrix, FYI. Continue.
Elon Musk thinks we are.
He believes in what simulation theory.
Simulation theory, yeah.
Which is kind of like the Matrix.
But yeah, I mean, the Matrix was at a time, it's an interesting blend of cultural signifiers, because basically you had a lot of 90s science fiction contemplating different realities or different ventures into artificial realities, whether it's David Cronenberg's Existence, you got the paranoia lab rat testing of Alex Proyas's Dark City, you have Catherine Bigelow's Strange Days, and then what very much influenced The Matrix was Ghost in the Shell, and the ideas that consciousness and that the ideas of blending technological advancements or applications to a human body, that consciousness remains or evolves. And I mean, you can very much clearly see the Matrix delving into that. Well,
but this is also like, I mean, this like what's really real is even broader than that, right?
Yeah.
Instead of, you can see in everything from not only the more science fiction stuff you mentioned to anything from, I guess, Stalker.
Yeah.
To the Truman Show, right? I mean, it's like, what
Truman
is
Show
really real? Like, what is this really happening? Is this constructed? Which I guess it's rich. It's rich because cinema is a constructed world. It is sort of although I guess this, video games touched on here in this one.
Yeah, absolutely.
But certainly for. I guess you could debate whether cinema or video games are better at sort of constructing a world at this point that kind of... So it becomes kind of this metafilmic reflection on the nature of reality and what's really real, and what you see on the screen can seem realer sometimes than your own life, right? Or hyper real, right?
Well, and we've had a lot of ventures in... excuse me, in that kind of contemplation, and The Matrix is kind of the peak of it, because of what a substantial impact it had on the cultural momentum and consciousness, and for good reason. I mean, it is exquisitely executed.
Yeah.
It blends religious ideas from Hinduism to advanced scientific ideas to a realm of identity and consciousness and body that we're still kind of having conversations about, that Lana and Lily have embraced. They are transgender, and that they are now, they embodied and accepted what they believe is their true selves. And so you can tell that the Matrix is very personal kind of venturing of idea. And so the first Matrix feels personal, it feels focused, and even though it's blending a lot of this nostalgia for like 60s revolutionary ideas. I mean, the red pill that got adopted by right-wing advanced, like,
So have you taken the red pill?
Red pilling. Alex Jones took that up.
I'm blue pilled. I'm a blue pilled cuck.
Blue pilled cuck.
That's right, I'm cucked.
So it's so interesting that the realm of the Matrix has evolved into almost a different degree than what they could have anticipated, which is, I think, the most interesting part about science fiction: what you predict and what comes to fruition. And the Matrix, I feel like, I don't know, it's such an interesting conversation to have, which I feel we'll get into. But the Matrix is important. I was of the age where I saw the Matrix on video before Reloaded came out, and then I was of the age to see Reloaded in theaters. And I was disappointed with Reloaded, even though it had some pretty rambunctious and jaw-dropping action spectacle.
Yeah, it's got some. It's a movie of highs and lows, maybe. Or not.
Yeah.
I don't even know lows. But it's not.
Yeah, it's not as clear.
It doesn't pay off the promise.
Yeah, it's not as clear. It's not as focused. It clearly is trying to encapsulate a broader mode than what was already introduced. The conversation pieces that could happen after the Matrix are sort of laid waste by Reloaded, and I think even more by Revolutions. I think both broaden the narrative scope of the world, but not the conceptual scope. I think that and that's really fair. My problem with the Matrix trilogy. I rarely go back to visit Reloaded or Revolutions. I don't think there's much of a point to do so. So Resurrections was a peculiarity to me, and I think by judgment, and when we get into spoiler stuff, a peculiarity to Lana Wachowski as well, who clearly was dragged kicking and screaming to make this. And
I think I'm gonna like this more than you.
Yeah, probably.
I liked it quite a bit. It's a far from perfect movie. It does suffer from, God, if we say this one more time, someone's gonna, maybe I'll finally get a negative comment or something. It's too long by half an hour.
Oh my goodness, yeah.
It would have been much better if it had been shortened.
Yes.
Because it wouldn't get it just gets kind of in the weeds of, I don't even know, not really the concept stuff, just kind of unraveling this story that it feels like it has to unravel.
Yeah, they leave behind some of the concept stuff, I think, midway through.
It certainly becomes, I think I don't know if they leave it behind. I would say it doesn't, it's not front and center anymore.
Yeah.
But I still liked it. So here's part of what I liked about it. I appreciate how little the trailer actually gives away, which is hard. Yeah, which is why it's hard to do a spoiler-free review, more than to say how you felt about it. Because I did not... obviously, from the trailer that Neo is somehow plugged back into the Matrix or something like the Matrix.
Yeah, or something, yeah.
Yeah, and that Trinity is somehow maybe in there too. I feel like that's about what you know from the trailer.
Yeah.
And you don't know how they're going to sort of unravel it.
Yeah.
And I was legitimately surprised. Like, I didn't foresee exactly how they kind of unspooled the situation. Mm-hmm. So that alone I thought was cool. And I guess the conversation, I think that's sort of a higher level conversation with having it. I'm going to call this a spoiler light conversation. I like the movie. Kyle didn't like it as much. Because I do think there's this isn't so much about the what happens in the movie, except sort of near the beginning, but kind of philosophically what's going on.
Yeah.
I don't think that the original Matrix movie is about much of anything.
Okay.
And I love it. But I think that it's like a lot of movies we talk about. The example we always go back to is Star Wars.
Yeah.
Like, I don't think there's any sort of ideology to the original Matrix movies at all. They have, and in fact, I think it suffers in the same way that Battlestar Galactica. This is more of a TV problem, right? Mm-hmm. I'm told that Lost suffers from this problem, although I never watched it, where you have these cool high concept ideas, but you don't know how to pay them off. Mm-hmm. Like, to me, the Matrix trilogy is an example of making a great first movie and then not really knowing what to do with it. Mm-hmm. Because I don't think that, because it introduces all these characters and ideas that don't ever get really paid off in a very satisfying way. Like this idea of the Oracle, right, that gets mentioned in the movie but is never sort of paid off in a particularly interesting way.
Yeah. Because you're right, it dabbles in.
It's like a cool idea, but you have no. But they didn't have a way to pay. They couldn't get their way to a way to pay it off in a way where you're like, oh, that's what was really going on. So it just becomes a kind of like, ooh, isn't that sort of spooky and weird?
Yeah, the comparison to Star Wars makes a lot of sense, because Star Wars, you can apply a lot of interpretation, a lot of political interpretation that's not necessarily there. It's very vague.
Everybody, and that's one thing that is prescient about The Matrix, and I think that this movie is looking at more clearly with the benefit of history, right, is that just like everyone thinks the bad guy's the Empire, everyone thinks the people they disagree with it's taking the blue pill, right? This whole idea, yes, it is true that the right has seized on the idea of the red pill, right? But everyone thinks that the other side is deluded.
Yeah, absolutely.
Right? Like no, like people on, people like liberal Democrats think that the quote unquote red people are as deluded as anyone has ever been.
To wake up, be woken up.
Yeah, and I mean, given some of the people who kind of have emerged out of that movement, like the folks who stormed the Capitol, to think that these people are deluded is not without some basis.
Yeah.
Right.
Yes.
So I think that this movie is much more political. It has much more of a clear political sort of message and a perspective that has clearly been born. Oh, I don't want to say clearly. I don't research directors and what they say and what they think. I'm aware that the Wachowskis are trans. I'm aware of that fact. I don't want to invert it. I mean, and they make a joke about it, right, in the movie, where it's like that a bunch of the people who are developing new ideas for the Matrix are like, it's about trans ideology
and crypto-fascism.
Which, like, I mean, to read the original Matrix as being about trans ideology, or even this one, is pretty ridiculous. But I do think it is about, you know what came to my mind while I was watching this movie? I'm a big fan of the band Radiohead. And on their second album, The Bends, Radiohead wrote a song called My Iron Lung, which is about Creep, which was the song that sort of launched their career, but became something that was kind of it's like they needed it, but they didn't want it, right?
Yeah.
And I feel like The Matrix is very much the Wachowskis' Iron Lung. They don't...
Yeah.
And this movie is sort of like... I mean, they basically come out... I mean, now we're getting into spoiler territory. I mean, very early in the movie, they actually mention Warner Brothers and that they're being forced to make this. Which, like, the fact that they did that, I have to say, I kind of love.
Well, and
I really did sort of chuckle at that, because I'm wow,
I did too.
We're going for. I guess we're gonna go here.
Yeah.
Like, and they did, and for that alone, like I'll take a movie like this over a Spider-Man any day of the week, because at least, like, there's something here.
Yes.
Right? I mean, like, I agree with you that it's not... This is a far from perfect movie, and I don't know that it perfectly pays off all the things it sets up.
It doesn't.
But it does have at least, like I think it does have at least sort of something to say that's interesting.
So this is... Which
I don't think... I mean, I love the first Matrix movie.
Yeah.
But once again, I think it's one of these things that I just think it's just it has I understand why people look to it for some sort of message, but it's not a message movie, and it doesn't mean anything. And what's funny is the Wachowskis know it. Because one of the better jokes in the movie is where Neil Patrick Harris's character says, "You know what it's about? It's about bullet time." Like, that's what it's fucking about, and they know it as well as anyone.
Yeah.
The Matrix was an excuse to do cool-looking shit.
Yeah.
That is iconic and super fun to watch.
Absolutely.
And I think they know that.
They do.
And I think that they find the idea that people read all these things into it to be kind of ridiculous.
I mean,
and in fact, they have characters saying ridiculous things about what the movie's about.
Yes.
Yeah. So once again, I don't know if this is what they actually feel. I don't know if they've commented on it. This is entirely my interpretation. But the extent to which this movie is sort of a repudiation of the things that they made, that they were given probably over $100 million to sort of take the piss a little bit on something that they did that is iconic, I think is kind of wild.
Yeah. Well, and I wish
it had to be a contractual thing. They basically had to have some contractual right of first refusal to make the movie.
Right of first refusal. I think
so they said,
100%.
okay, well, I guess we'll make it so you don't let someone else make it, right?
And this is the thing. I agree 100% with what you're saying. I did chuckle at those scenes. Probably the best sequence in the movie is what they use in the trailers, Jefferson Airplane's White Rabbit. When they use it in the movie, it's actually this bizarre sequence of them pitching ideas, like you said. They're pitching ideas.
So basically,
what the Matrix is about.
I'm presumably, I don't know. Okay, so we're in spoilers now. Yeah, so we're in a world where the Matrix trilogy was a video game.
Yes.
Developed
by Thomas Anderson.
Paul Thomas
Anderson. No, Thomas Anderson.
Thomas Anderson, a.k.a. Keanu Reeves, a.k.a. Neo. He's a famous game
developer. Yeah,
like I love this idea that like game developers are famous, right? I mean, game developers are famous like to 5 nerds, right?
5 nerds. But now he's
like a celebrity
because the Matrix has encapsulated something cultural within this universe,
within this made up world, right?
Yeah, and so he's a developer, and so they are forcing upon him a 4th installment, which is 100% the meta context of the whole endeavor that you're watching.
And like, by the way, shout out to Christina Ricci, who has a small but great scene. Where she's like a product consultant.
Yeah, I've not seen her in a lot, but it's fun to watch her show up.
Yeah, she shows up as like someone who's done focus groups. Like, what did they say? The words we have to focus on.
Yeah.
Like, what do people associate with the Matrix?
No, and that's the sequence. It's him like looking in the mirror, taking his blue pill, and then coming to work, and everyone's pitching these.
By the way, I wish
ideas.
drugs were shiny like that. It would be funner to take.
Yeah, I agree.
I'm gonna ask my doctor if he can put my medicine into capsules.
You compare the pills.
Like
you even see a scene of Morpheus offering in the original because they do these interspliced cuts of the original because that's like memory or flashes in Thomas Anderson's
Well, I think it's like footage from the game, right?
Yeah,
too.
yeah.
Like,
whatever they're alluding to. But you compare like the pills that in this one are very, very shiny and they look like pills. You go back to the original and they're like Mike and Ike's.
Yeah, I was gonna say
they look like that. It's pretty fun. But I have to say, so the movie opens with a deja vu sequence of the original Trinity fight, and it has and then you find out that it's a sequence within the game, but then there are consciousnesses within that game. It's interesting because I just released today an episode on World on a Wire, which is Werner Fassbender's film from the 70s. And before there was internet, before there was fax lines, before there was interconnectivity, that movie was about the top layers and infinite layers of worlds within worlds, and it's like you plug in and you can go in, and it's fascinating because that movie brings up these ideas, and the Matrix was almost Matrix Resurrections almost hinting at worlds within worlds that you can keep going through, but they don't really go anywhere with it. I really
like basically he builds a new Morpheus within a program,
and that
is inside his game,
yes, which
is itself his reality is itself a program.
Yes.
So there's some sort of, what do they call it, like a modal or something?
Yeah, a modal, and it has sentience, and it comes out.
Yeah, they basically resurrect Morpheus vis-a-vis software that he builds inside the Matrix.
Which, so there was a lot of complaints going in based on the trailer that Yahya Abdul-Mateen II was playing Morpheus, but it actually makes sense in the context of the movie that he is this
Would
other
people complain?
creative.
I thought it was. I thought that was cool. I was.
Some people. Well, no, because they didn't.
I mean, I love Lawrence Fishburne, but like,
no, they didn't know. They didn't know that what the idea was. That they just thought he was recast.
Okay.
Now, here's the thing. I don't think it then explains Jonathan Groff as Smith. That annoyed me. I think Hugo Weaving should have been.
Yeah. Well, give that guy some work. Maybe he was busy. I don't know.
Yeah, maybe. I think he originally was supposed to be, and he turned it down. So we have to give him some, leeway in that decision. That he just didn't want to come back and be part of it. But, it's interesting because the Wachowskis have worked with Hugo Weaving. He's probably one of the more interesting things about Cloud Atlas, that he shows up. At one point he's a woman, and at one point he's
Although, I mean, I don't know. Like, I like Hugo Weaving a lot. I would have been happy to see him in it. It would have been cooler. On the other hand, I mean, it's all fucking... We're all inside fucking computers. Yeah. Like, I don't know why it couldn't be played by, Christina Hendricks for all I care. Make it be anyone.
You're right. It could have been anyone, and obviously I think the illusion here is that they're trying to hide it as directly as possible because in his mind, Hugo Weaving is Agent Smith in his video game.
Yeah, and they sort of play around visually with this idea that this is how you look to these people. This is how you...
Yeah.
Yeah.
So there is that. So, but that's the thing. As you were describing it, and I was laughing. I was laughing at the Warner Brothers pitch. They're basically like, well, they're going to do it without you anyway, so we're offering it you now to be part of it. And you get the feeling that is 100% how this Matrix movie came to be. Like this, they
well, even if it didn't, it's funny, right? It's, I mean, like I'm saying, like for them to go in some sort of weird meta-filmic, like this was our 8.5 experience. Like I don't want to do this. I don't know what to do. Like it's just great. I mean, yeah. That I was legitimately surprised by all that, which I had no idea was going to figure into the movie.
And so for me, and it builds to what is essentially the awakening moment. Like Morpheus comes to Thomas Anderson or Neo and offers him, the pill, and he starts going like, I'm going crazy. And it's actually my favorite action set piece, mostly because not because of how it's orchestrated, because I don't think any of them are actually notably very interesting. It was the idea behind it, because Neo's not even involved. Like he's like trying to touch his hands and like trying to. He's like,
he's freaking out.
He's freaking out. And there's this whole absurd action set piece happening behind him, and I was like, okay. If the movie goes in this direction where and this is where I think I'm just disappointed, because the ideas that are presented, they don't 100% go with them, and then it reverts back to what the Matrix Reloaded and Revolutions is just kind of this pampered nostalgia for the series, and that it just has this feeling of the familiar rather than actually venturing a fulfillment of these new ideas.
See, I found it a lot more satisfying than that, because to me, I agree with you. The setup is more interesting than the payoff.
Yeah,
and the payoff, but in a way, the payoff is sort of supposed to be less interesting, because what I take the movie to ultimately be saying is that, this is just a love story, and that's all it ever was.
Yeah.
That's all it ever was, and. We've all been like, maybe they felt like they were kind of dragged into doing these sequels. Like, here's the issue, right? You make a movie that's like, and like I said, I don't know if this is what actually happened. Okay, so this is my speculation, and I'm talking about people's psychological motivation, so they don't even know what's happened. This is just how I could imagine it played out. You make a movie, it's super successful, it's iconic. Nobody could have anticipated how successful the first Matrix would have been, to be one of the iconic movies of our lifetime. Right? Like when you talk about the most imitated movies that have been made while we've been alive, Pulp Fiction, The Matrix, and Shrek. I know, but it's true. I've made the argument many times that Shrek is the most influential movie of our time. And I think if you start to think about it, you'll see that I'm right. But that's too much to get into that. But so you get a pile of money to make 2 more movies. Nobody says no.
No, nobody
says no, right? Especially they're early in their careers. They're not where they are now, where they wanted to say no to this movie, maybe, but couldn't because they were like, well, if you let someone else make it, that's going to be fucking worse.
Yeah.
So we'll get a pile of money to essentially kind of, like I said, in some ways repudiate the thing that we made, the thing that we created.
Yeah.
Because the joke is that everyone thinks all these idiots in the movie think the Matrix is about all these ideas. And the Matrix is just a love story.
Yeah, yeah.
That's all it really is. She believed in me, and now I need to believe in her. Neo says that's the core of the movie.
Yeah.
But the movie ends up being about more than the originals. Because what it's about, I mean, what it's really mining is the same terrain that Fight Club mines, right? Which is that, and it goes right along with all our dystopia myopia conversations, because it's about what are the actual means of social control.
Yeah.
Like the regime in the original Matrix movie is just like the Empire in Star Wars. It's just this faceless boot on your neck with no ideology.
It's true. Yeah.
Whereas what the Neil Patrick Harris character, who I think does a good job in this movie and is a credible and interesting villain.
Yeah, he's kind of playing it in a kind of an awareness that serves it well, and I was not rolling my eyes at it.
But so like this movie is saying, like, yeah, we had this other shit. Here are the actual means of social control, right? And I think that the movie it's about fear and desire, and I mean, there's the scene where Trinity's at the coffee shop talking to Neo when they're still in the Matrix. They still don't know exactly who they are. So, like,
yeah.
I've become this mother and this family person because I feel like that's the thing I'm supposed to want. But why do I really want that? Right? And that is how social control in our society actually works, right?
Yeah.
Through expectation and fear and consumption.
Yeah.
Right? It's not surprising that they always end up drinking these nice coffees at a nice coffee shop, which is the perfect exemplar of
like simulate.
That's how you express your individuality in our society, not through your politics, right? Because who gives a fuck about that? You don't have any power. But you can have consumer choices, and you can sort of within this very narrow band will create the illusion of freedom. But you don't even really have a lot of freedom with the big question like, do you become a mom? Do you have a family? Do you have kids? Because the social pressure you feel is so real. You have this idea that you don't even know where it comes from. And it does seem like it comes from the Matrix, right?
Yeah.
Because, like, why do so many people have these very fixed notions of what the good life is?
Yeah. You
can't point to any one thing, right? You can't point to, like, a totalitarian state that kind of tells you what you have to do. It seems to come from your own mind, even though it's so historically contingent.
And that's an interesting thing, because also in World on a Wire, it's almost like social pressure, systemic pressure, everything that society's built on. Maybe it's code, like in the Matrix, and that is how you can associate it or use it as a metaphor. But it is coded in, and as you're speaking, it's coded into our nature-nurture framework.
Yes.
And I agree with you. I find this all very interesting. What I think fails me, and this is what I was thinking about, because what is the Matrix kind of wanting to say now? And I think it is sort of making a commentary, as you're saying, but who's able to free themselves from the Matrix? You know, I get the feeling that it's, you know, because Neo and Trinity have these past live selves, that they have an intrinsic malaise to being back in the Matrix, and that's what she is dissatisfied. She's like going through the motions. She's married literally to what I found funny is a Chad. I found that
I didn't even
quite
think about
humorous.
that, but yes, I'm sure that was a conscious choice.
And that she is trapped into what society expects her to have: happiness as children, husband, family. And Neo is kind of alone, and he has fame and fortune, but he is dissatisfied because there's nothing to it. Because
Neo is the Wachowskis, right?
Yes,
After the Matrix,
I agree.
That much is basically explicit,
Yes.
right? Like, you have the thing that everybody thinks is the best thing ever, why aren't you happy?
Yeah. Why aren't you happy?
Because
And
you're not living your true life, right? And maybe that goes with the trans thing, but like I said, I think that, you know, that could be I mean, the feeling that like you're going through the motions and doing what's expected of you, and you have all this shit, but you're not happy. I mean, this is like, I'm not saying they're like tilling new fields, right?
No, they're not.
But like they are going someplace. Like this movie actually has ideas about the world in it.
Yeah.
Which I just don't think the original Matrix does, and I think they know it doesn't, and that's why they kind of make a joke about what all these people say it's about, right?
Well,
and that's played for laughs.
Yes, exactly. Well, and so what I was kind of yearning for is because the Matrix is almost what we willingly I think we've become more a society of Joe Pantolianos, like from the original. We want to be in the Matrix.
But the thing that's better about this version of that asking that question is that it's more plausible.
Yeah. Yeah.
Right? Because the alternative because the conflict is better set up, right?
Yeah.
Because the conflict is that we have actually crafted this thing to appeal to you, like to what people actually want, right?
Yeah.
Like, you know, and that's why the bad guy isn't a fucking Fed, it's a therapist.
It's
right?
a therapist.
That's very telling, right?
Yeah.
Like because this is not about like I said, it's not about coercion, it's about manipulation, or a more subtle form of coercion, if you like, via social pressures, right?
Well, and I think all of that is evident, but I almost feel I wanted it to wrestle with that more. I think maybe I wanted Thomas Anderson not to immediately accept the notions of this reality as false or empty, or that the Matrix exists as sort of this slave tool. That honestly, I wish the movie were about Trinity. You know, it basically him becoming, maybe just accepting the blue pill, the Joe Pantoliano lifestyle. It's like, no, I like it here. I'm this person, but instead it introduces malaise. It introduces dissatisfaction immediately because he just isn't who he is supposed to be.
Yes, I agree with you there. That like it's maybe a more interesting or weirder movie if he's happy in the Matrix.
Yeah, and then you
as
have
opposed
maybe
to being like super depressed and suspicious of the whole thing.
Yeah, and then maybe the heist aspect, because it turns into kind of like a Matrix heist movie where they're trying to get Trinity out of her supervised and highly controlled, port in the real world versus, and then also like trying to awaken her and get her to choose.
Yeah,
I think it would have been more interesting that they find Neo, and Neo is the hero of their nostalgia of the real world, and he's happy. And then maybe it's about getting Trinity, because that was the answer in the first place, was love. And I ultimately, that's what ends. It's coming around to the same conclusion.
It is certainly funnier if they force him out.
Yes.
Right. And I understand it's sort of built into their world building that like you have to want to leave
in
or
order
it fucks
to,
you up.
Yeah.
But whatever, let him get fucked up, right? I mean, and see what happens.
I think that would have been a more interesting film.
Like let him come out sort of weird and fragmented.
Yeah.
No, I agree with you. I think that there's, like I said, this is not like a perfect movie by any means, but I found it way more satisfying than the sequels, and I
will say it's more interesting.
I was ultimately like, given the attachment. I mean, since we're in the realm of nostalgia, given the attachment I had to these characters in that movie, I did find the ending to be sort of moving, even if it's not like revelatory. Right, they win and they fly away and they come back and they're gonna
rainbows,
and they're gonna they're gonna sort of try to do something different. Right, I did find it moving and effective, even though I wasn't. I agree with you that it's not. Like I said, I mean this is not, we're not breaking new ground here.
No.
But like the problem is like, what do you do, right? The visual idiom you created is so baked into cinema now that like There's nothing to be done there.
Yeah.
Right? You're not. I mean, the joke about actually, the more I think about the bullet time joke, the more I like it because it's like there is no bullet time. Like there's nothing you can do now. Like visual filmmaking has gotten to the point where it's so hard to do something that you're like, whoa, like I never imagined that, or I never, because like CGI and computer graphics have gotten crazy, and you can do all kinds of wild shit with that. And like the cool tricks of the Hong Kong stuff, like the wires and stuff. I mean, that's all been. I mean, it still looks cool, but it's not gonna be like the first time you see this or the first time you see Crouching Tiger, and you're like, oh my god, like this is crazy, right?
Yeah.
It's all we're all desensitized to that.
We are a bit desensitized.
I mean, like for a movie to do something interesting visually, it has to do something like what the next movie does.
Yeah, I
something very different, right?
I do have to say you did make the comment that this is more interesting than any Spider-Man kind of sequel or Marvel incarnation, and I do have to agree. It's interesting because there are things about this that I lacked an enjoyment quality. Once they were in the real world, I think it slogged a bit, especially with the Jada Pinkett Smith scenes and sequences. I don't think it really added much. A lot of the action sequences are a little bland, and maybe that in itself is
especially near the end of it.
Oh yeah,
like those are the. I mean, when they're jumping off walls and like walking through portals, at least there's kind of a visual interest to that.
Yeah, I mean,
the final sequence, like in the warehouse and then the car chase thing, that stuff was
where people were they were controlling people's bodies as like bombs, like outside. I just found it to be boring. Like it was just slogging. It was boring. It was visually uninteresting. And then I was just feeling the I guess the thesis of the film, the ideas that they were postulating were not coming to fruition in the way that I kind of wanted it to.
Yeah, I agree with you, but like I said, at least there's like an interest. There's an idea here, and there's a counterweight to that idea, and the villain and the sort of antagonist works better because he has a point.
Yeah,
right. He has a point. Like his sort of take on like what makes people tick is a lot closer to reality and more compelling than the whole like, the humans are viruses thing, which is iconic but sort of ridiculous, right?
Yeah, humans are viruses.
Like you're replacing a kind of a nihilistic totalitarianism with a kind of a more contemporary marketing driven notion of social control.
Well, and that's the thing. I did want more. It exists in this movie, but I think I wanted more of it. Is the realm of philosophy, because it's introduced, but it's not ventured in the same way. Smith is such a character in the original, where his philosophy is spoken, but you're right. It is sort of just nihilistic, it's controlling, and this one it is trying to pamper. It's like, you want the blue pill, we want to sell you the blue pill, you want this life, and you want to create your own matrix. And I think that's what's happening today. People are creating their own matrices.
Yes.
They're creating their own bubbles, they're creating their own truths and realities.
Yes. And this movie is about how those mechanisms have become more sophisticated, right?
Yes.
I mean, because so much of thinking about social control of the 20th century, right, is dominated by thinking about the Nazis, right, and thinking about totalitarianism. I mean, you saw that all over Dystopia Myopia.
Absolutely.
It's like the Nazis and this idea of just tremendous, just brute force looms very large. But in the 21st century, that's just not. I mean, there are totalitarian governments out there. I don't deny it, but like, that's just not how it works. Even in oppressive countries like China, that's still a country that's very much about carrots and sticks, and kind of this social pressure of like, how are we going to become together this great nation, right? It's not just like, I mean, and I'm not trying to undersell what they do to the Uyghurs and stuff like that. I'm just saying that like the mechanisms of social control, even in a undemocratic country like that, are much different and more sophisticated or subtle, like the whole idea of social credit scores and stuff like that, than just like the idea we have of Nazism, and that just loomed so large for so long that in Star Wars and in the original Matrix, that's the villain. The villain is just this unspeakable, not even ideological. I mean,
Yeah.
the Nazis had all their insane racial ideology and stuff like that.
Which is,
I mean, I guess the Matrix is kind of a racist thing, and that like machines are better than humans, but it's not like, I mean, it's just they're just evil, right?
yeah, yeah.
And
Yep.
and
that's why the red pill thing can be taken by any ideology, because you need to wake up from the dictated reality.
Yes, they're evil, you're good, you're being lied to, you believe what you believe is bullshit, you've been tricked and fooled.
I don't know who like watches this, but some people in high school had the same experience. We had to watch in my AP American History class. We watched The Matrix to open up the class, and he came in dressed. He came in dressed as Morpheus, and he offered us the red pill or the blue pill.
Oh god!
In order to be woken up, and there was a class we read Howard Zinn's People's History of the United States. And, read The Jungle and all these books, to have, and that's why when people talk about their education these days, about that they don't learn about the awful things of American history, I'm like, I did.
Well, but first of all, you were at AP, and second of all,
it's
like that was when things were turning. Because once again, I'm a little older than you, and like, yeah, there was a move to more social history. Like learning about American history was about learning about what people's lives were actually like versus, memorizing the presidents or stuff like that.
Yeah.
I mean, whatever. There's a lot. I mean, that's funny, right?
Yeah.
Well, it's funny. Since you said this, I'm gonna bring this up because I think it's sort of tangentially relevant. One meme that I see liberals in particular post on Facebook is this thing that like history is there for you to learn, not for you to like or not like. Mm-hmm. Have you seen this kind of stuff?
I think I
history.
See
it doesn't. It's sort of the liberal version of facts don't care about your feelings. And the thing that I hate the most about it, it's a really dumb meme. But why it's dumb is because it's so simplistic.
Yeah.
Like how we interpret history is a site of contestation.
Yes.
Both about what happened and why it happened.
Yeah.
Right?
Hindsight is not 20/20.
There is no objective history.
Yeah.
Like, in the wake of the Civil War, a bunch of people called the Dunning School concocted a lie that I think they probably knew was a lie, that it was really about states' rights and not about slavery. Mm-hmm. And that dominated discourse in America for a long time.
Yeah.
Because the goal was to let the South reintegrate itself into the United States without feeling bad, without making them feel guilty.
Yeah.
Right? Because they were so angry about the first, decade of Reconstruction and how punitive it could be, or how punitive it tried to be.
Yeah.
And then, of course, people say, well, it was about slavery. And how could it not have been about slavery? But I mean, like, there is no history, right? If by that you just mean some sort of like objective recitation of the facts, right? Like what happened and what it means is one of the primary sites of ideological contestation.
Yeah, absolutely.
Right, and I think it's important, and I think some interpretations are better than others. But to just sort of try to wave it off as like what you think, it's idiotic, and it shows like a real. But that's what I think this movie is trying to get at a little bit, is the move from something that is very simplistic to something that is somewhat more sophisticated.
Yeah.
A somewhat more sophisticated understanding of the world.
Yeah.
Like I said, it's not breaking new ground.
No.
But the fact that a movie like this was made for this much money to sort of send up something and to criticize the people who made them make it,
deconstruct its own
is to me
mythology.
Is sort of wild, right? I mean,
yeah.
So for that reason alone, I enjoyed it, and I'm happy I watched it because I got more out of it, like I said, than I would have. Like, there may be certain technical ways in which some Marvel movies are better.
Yeah,
they might be tighter, although they're not always very tight.
Yeah.
But this movie at least like manages to be somewhat interesting.
Yeah, and I think
it does actually, like, insofar as it's a piece of nostalgia, it did at least hit for me at some moments in a way that a lot of the other stuff doesn't at all.
And I will agree with you. And I think we can wrap up the conversation in the sense that I think in its meta contextualizing, its deconstruction of its own lore, its own piece of cinema history, that does take kind of a bold and wild take to swing for the fences and some sort of conceptual idea that nobody would really articulate. Nobody would have that kind of self-awareness to deconstruct Marvel cinema from Disney. Like, they would not allow
or Star Wars, right?
Yeah, they would not allow that sense of deconstruction because it would damage the sort of reputation.
How great would it have been to be I wish I could have been there when like some Warner exec like watched the first cut of this. It was just like, what?
Yeah, what?
What did we? What have we paid for?
Yeah, they would have no idea.
Really. Like, so what? We just gave these people $100 million to take a shit on us. I mean,
it's essentially what happened.
I mean, for that alone, I sort of have to.
Warner Brothers. Let's give Warner Brothers a little bit of credit, even though they have sort of messed up their rollout of some DC expanded universe in a sense of rushing and a sense of.
Well, they also let this movie get buried underneath Spider-Man, which I think is kind of hilarious.
Did.
I think that's clearly an intent. I mean, they could have released this movie whenever.
Yeah,
the fact that they let it just get like plowed underfoot by this.
But everything was going to get plowed under Spider-Man. Spider-Man is like the biggest thing.
But I'm saying they could have released this in February,
That's
right?
true.
And it would have been the biggest thing
in February.
Yeah,
probably. It is.
It's not like they need to get this out for awards season.
No.
Right? Although people say Spider-Man should be a Best Picture candidate.
No,
so.
it's gross.
So,
what a joke.
I mean,
I'm sorry. I mean,
what do I know?
I really, if you think Spider-Man needs to be up for Best Picture, like, watch more movies. Like, there's so much more out there.
People haven't seen any movies, dog.
It's just there's
people
so much out there.
People aren't going to the theaters.
There's so many voices
and the truth is,
out
we live in LA. Like, they can't even see the fucking good movies if they want to.
Yeah, I know. It is bizarre to me, like, because Spider-Man, the more I think about it, just plunges in my mind, and the sense of mediocrity that it is. I mean, because it's enjoyable mediocrity. Don't get me wrong, it hits some emotional places, and we had a long conversation about it, but it's not interesting. It's not original. It's not captivating in a sense that it's challenging your sensibilities as a person, as a human, as an American, as an international person.
It's not even making the attempts that this movie is making. And like, even if you want to tell me that, and I think you're right, it doesn't pay off as interestingly as it could, absolutely. No. But like, at least there's something there.
No, I agree. And because there's something there, I have to give it some credit, because for a good 30 minutes there, I was intrigued as to where it was going to go.
Yeah, but I agree with you. There's definitely a lot of like there's a lot of weirder and more interesting ways they probably could have played out the second and third acts, but yeah, I mean, whatever. That you know how we think.
I think this is the weirdest reboot I think I've ever seen, mostly because what we've been saying, and I think what you've been articulating really well, is to try something different. That is bold. You have to give it some credit. I don't think it is 100% successful, but it almost doesn't matter, because the attempt is almost revolutionary in this vein.
Yeah,
in this,
it's like
world.
at least there's some sort of like creative juice, and it also, and this goes back to one final thought for me, to one thing I talk about a lot with these movies, is that at least it bears the signature of a filmmaker. Like, whatever you think about the Wachowskis, this is their movie. It is. Yeah. It's their franchise. This is not Ghostbusters. I mean, there's so many of these movies we watch, Eternals, Spider-Man, whatever, where the director is almost irrelevant. The director just disappears completely.
That voice does not matter. There is no articulation.
And this is not that.
No.
Like, for better or worse, right?
This is
not that. Yeah. This has their signature.
Yeah, absolutely.
Right? And respect for that, because if I'm going to go see a movie, I'd like to see a movie as opposed to, what Martin Scorsese called audiovisual entertainment.
Yeah, yeah. No, because this is trying to say something, and I do, and especially in a world that the Matrix has evolved and changed, or the idea of what that Matrix was supposed to be, or be a commentary on, it is different now, and the movie is reckoning with that in some interesting ways. I wish it just were a little more, but that's okay.
No.
That's okay. We get what we get sometimes, and
so let's talk about a fresh new tale on the scene.
let's do, yeah. Yeah, something that's very new.
Something I don't know if you've heard
of Macbeth. We're not supposed to say that name.
This isn't a theater.
Yeah, this isn't a theater.
I guess the whole world's a stage, right? Shakespeare tells us. So once again, we get our second collab with Shakespeare in almost as many weeks, right? Mm-hmm. Instead of getting West Side Story, we get a collab of Shakespeare, the Coens, Denzel Washington, Frances McDormand, and Fritz Lang also involved in the making of this movie. The ghost of Fritz Lang.
It is. I will say, I mean, the trailers they give you a little bit of sense of the visual qualities of this movie, but holy cow, the stripped down yet highly evocative German expressionism that is in this production design is, I think, the biggest feature of this movie.
It's high modernism. Like, I can't even. I mean, nobody's made a movie like this in 50 years. I mean, it's amazing. I love this movie. I'm just gonna say I love this movie.
I have some criticisms, but I
mean, there is nothing like this.
There is not.
You will not see another movie like this.
I will say, I think Fritz Lang. I think you could put Ingmar Bergman in the conversation.
Yes,
too.
there's
this
very
feels
Bergman,
like,
especially the whole witch thing. That's very Bergman-esque.
Yeah, I mean the whole visual sense of this story is what is the driving force of it. And obviously, I mean, Joel Coen, the Coens in general, I mean, they're obviously kind of one and the same. When you have one, you're essentially getting both.
It's a twofer. You get a twofer with these guys.
And I know Ethan's not involved.
Is that their sales pitch? You get a twofer
out of us. But, it is an interesting, experiment here that he is delving into what I think is at the core of their entire filmography, is irony, fatalism, and destiny versus choice. These things.
Go to the source. You go to the fountainhead.
Yeah, and I mean, whether it's Blood Simple, whether it's Fargo, No Country for Old Men, there's always a Shakespearean fatalism to all of their stories. I mean, even if you get they are so well read of men, and their sources of homage and influence are all over the place. I mean, they love Dashiell Hammett, that influenced Miller's Crossing. They love, they go back to the Iliad and the Odyssey in order to do "Oh Brother, Where Art Thou?" Like, they are well-read gentlemen, so I am not surprised that they are very influenced by the tragedy and the irony that fills Shakespeare's works. And I mean, obviously Shakespeare is such a profound influence on not only literary and stage, but also cinema.
In language,
in the language too.
I mean, it's whenever you watch Shakespeare, especially one of the big plays, right? And Macbeth is certainly one of the top tier works. Just the number of just phrases and idioms that you realize, like, you've heard before.
Yeah.
Like, it's just so, sound and fury signifying nothing, right?
Yeah.
It's just like, by the pricking of my thumb, something wicked this way comes. It's just, I mean, it's very rich, and it's interesting to see them after, yes, they've sort of done, they've moved around and around and around, and now they're like, okay, we're just gonna do one.
Yeah.
Right. We're just gonna actually do the thing. We're not gonna really adapt it. We're not gonna really.
No,
we're not really gonna.
So this was the interesting
reset
thing.
It.
This was the interesting thing for me. Going in, I thought, based on the Coens' history, based off their playfulness with genre and with character, I thought it was going to be a reinterpretation. I thought it was going to be sort of a twist on the legend of the tragedy of Macbeth, but it isn't. It just is straight text, and for its, I wouldn't say much fault. I was just a little surprised. I was surprised how lean it was. I mean, even though this is his shortest and most brutal play, Shakespeare's, I was surprised how lean they treated the text and how dedicated they were to the words. There was almost just a recitation of rhythm and form rather than it was performative. And I don't know if you felt that. For me, there was something lacking in performance, but I felt it was intentional. Like they were almost slaves to the text and its flows.
I loved the performances.
Well, no, I'm not taking away. I'm not taking anything. I think it's intentional, and I think they serve it well. But it's the rhythm of how the film is executed is about the text.
Yes. It's finally like I said, we're gonna do it.
Yeah.
Like we're not gonna do an interpretation, a resetting, a rethinking. We're gonna do it. We're gonna do Shakespeare, right? And yeah, I mean, why not?
Yeah.
Right? I mean, the words are that good, right? And you get two of the greatest actors alive to say them.
Yes. Yeah.
I mean, I don't know if people are talking about Denzel Washington for an Oscar. They should be.
I have to say I was more impressed with him than I was with her. And I don't want to take away from Frances McDormand. I think she's an extraordinary actress.
Yeah, but I mean, I think they both. I mean, the scenes they have together are incredible, right? I mean, just to watch two. I mean, obviously, I love them both. I don't know all as much about McDormand's history as an actor. I mean, Denzel Washington is a very committed stage actor, right?
Yes,
it has been for his entire
He's done Julius
career.
Caesar, yeah.
He's always endeavored to spend a lot of time doing stage acting, which is, a real commitment for someone who can, basically have a giant check drop into his hand whenever he wants to.
Millions of dollars whenever.
To make a movie.
I think he is one of the rare performers out there in movies. From what I understand, there's pay for play, where I think he'll be pay for not play or something like that. Like he'll get paid if the movie drops out, he'll get paid. Like that's the kind of weight he brings to the industry.
I mean, is he the best? He may be the best actor in the world. I mean, he's not. I mean, he's in the conversation. Like you couldn't.
I mean, he has such a grand career to measure
that.
Well,
and also I mean, it's sort of odd to say, right? But I think he's benefited in his career from his own flexibility and, quite frankly, from, I mean, how to put this? I mean, Hollywood is racist, right? And so especially early in his career, he was less considered kind of the classic leading man. Mm-hmm. And so he got to play these kind of wild roles, like in Philadelphia, where he's unbelievably good.
Devil in a Blue Dress.
Yeah,
right?
he's
early
doing
on. Malcolm
X, right, where he's doing these roles that he now I think hope things have gotten better, and obviously he's done a lot of great work, but I mean he got to have this tremendous range, mm-hmm. right, which has led him to have, I think, a body of work that in some ways, as much as I like this actor, is probably in some ways more compelling than, say, the body of work of Tom Hanks, right? Who is just going to be a leading man from moment to moment to moment, right? Like, you'd almost like to see him in, like, a character role, right? But that's just not... He's just like, I'm going to be the star. Yeah. I'm always the star. I mean, although I must say, like, even Tom Cruise has taken a couple of interesting character roles. I'm just thinking about not even who I think the best actors, but the people with the highest profile. But, I mean, Denzel Washington, tremendous actor, clearly a tremendous lover of both cinema and the stage. I think maybe more of a lover of the stage in his heart of hearts. Yeah. Engaging in this project to bring all the August Wilson plays to cinema, which, whatever you think about the specific instantiations, is a noble project, and
it's a noble project.
Is worthy of if there's a playwright that's worthy of having all his work put down, it's certainly August Wilson. But yeah, I mean, I guess I'm just sort of rambling about Denzel Washington because I like him so much.
Well, I think
he is. I mean, this is just beast of a performance, right?
And
Because he starts out more in that recitation mode, and he just lets the character
You're right.
slowly
It
unravel.
does have this interesting build to it.
What does he say to that one sort of pale, scared assistant? Get thy face away from me. So like it's just what he just does it. I'm just like, this motherfucker.
Yeah.
Like he can do it all.
It's so interesting because it was, I think Katie pointed out, he has this interesting physical gait that he had and the choices.
He sort of
very
shambles
particular.
around a little, and kind of ambles and shambles and bounces around.
Yeah, and she pointed out that she thinks, and I had no way of refuting or challenging, and it makes sense to me that it's the same kind of performative gait that people do for Henry VIII. And I thought that was an interesting observation because this Macbeth is rage-filled. This Macbeth is particularly nasty, which I'm not surprised it comes from the Coens. The Coens do not see humans in such a positive light, or particular humanity in a much positive light. And so there is an interesting build of what he not just desires but expects of the world to respond to his glory or his stature. There is a I'm forgetting the word because we're in podcast mode and I have like podcast brain where my brain turns off. But I mean, he has this expectation of life, and it turns into rage. And Denzel Washington.
We haven't really demarcated spoilers and not spoilers. It's fucking Shakespeare.
It's like, Shakespeare.
You know what happens.
I'm sorry if you don't know what happens in Macbeth. That's on you.
I don't know. I'm sorry to interrupt you. I was like, oh man, you know.
Oh, it's entitlement. He's entitled to these things, and you get that as soon as he removes himself from Duncan's tent. Played wonderfully by Brendan Gleeson, you know, in a very just just being there. But I liked Harry Melling, who we would all know as Harry Potter's cousin. I like that he is evolving in his career beyond Harry Potter in a stunning way. He's been in a lot of Coen projects. Well, at least he was in. He was in the Ballad of Buster Scruggs. He was in one of the vignettes, but he was in Lost City of Zed. I mean, he is becoming a great actor, and he is kind of I mean, he looks just like Brendan Gleeson, like a young Brendan Gleeson, which I really, really enjoyed. But as soon as he removes himself from the tent, the fury that's in his eyes, the fury that's in his tone and his shifting tone.
But also the fear. That's what's great, right? I mean, he is like so angry and feels so entitled, but also like feels swept along. I mean, that's why Macbeth is such a true tragedy, right? Because he feels like he is entitled to these things, but also he kind of has to take him. He's been told by the witch or the witches, which I thought was a cool little trick.
Yeah, Catherine Hunter, exquisite as
great.
The three witches.
Great, just great.
Yeah,
I mean, yeah, I love this movie. I just think it's so good. It's just, there are not many movies where I will have so many moments where I'm just like, wow. Mm-hmm. Like the moment where, you know, Birnam Wood comes to Dunsinane and, well, I expect, I'm going to see them walking. And they elide that. Instead, what they do is he opens up the window and the leaves just blow in on him. Yeah. Because it's just, I was like, wow, that is great.
The use of, see, this is an interesting thing because obviously Shakespeare's meant for the stage and cinema has, you know,
I mean, is there a great film version of Macbeth before this one? I don't think there is.
Roman Polanski's is exceptional. Yeah, it's for 1971, I think, and it's quite exceptional.
But I mean, they're like a lot of people think that.
Kira Kurosawa's Throne of Blood is also exquisite.
That's true. We got that because the one I was going to bring up, right, which has resisted a great film version, even though many people think it's his greatest, is King Lear. And once again, we would go to Kurosawa.
Ron is exceptional.
Yeah, but like a straightforward, sort of more traditional interpretation of King Lear. I don't think there is a great
No,
film
there's
version.
been some interesting influence. I think you can go Man from Laramie in the Western. Anthony Mann does some good psychological delving into King Lear as it is applied on the Western Manifest Destiny. I found that interesting, but you're right. As a clear text adaptation, King Lear eludes a lot of people.
I mean, it has to be like, for the Shakespeare, it's got to be like their Dune or something. It's got to be the White Whale. Because I mean,
Yeah.
when people say what's the greatest Shakespeare play, I mean, Lear is the one that'll come up more than almost any of them, right? It's certainly, I mean, I guess, people will throw in Hamlet, right? People, Romeo and Juliet, obviously super iconic. But of those, I mean, yeah, there's never been a straightforward film version of Lear, and yeah, I mean, these things resist. Some of them resist being committed to the screen.
Yeah, well, I mean, yeah, because cinema is an interesting venue for adaptation. I think the more interesting ones are the ones who have fun or expressionistic fun with it. You think of Baz Luhrmann's Romeo plus Juliet is interesting visually.
Yeah.
It's trying to capture the energy and rhythm and excitement of the language. You have Roman Polanski's text of Macbeth, which is more of a personal ode to travesty and tragedy, which is something he was dealing with during that time. And that's why this one comes into mind. We had a Macbeth adaptation not 4 years ago, I want to say. Justin Kurzel, who helmed Assassin's Creed, also did a Macbeth with Marion Cotillard and Michael Fassbender. And the reason, if you have not heard of that version, is because it's not very good. It stylistically is suffocating. They whisper the dialogue and sort of like keeping it a secret and trying it in a performative strangeness that I just did not think, it did not give the language any beauty or poetry, and it also kind of suffocated the film and its lacking of understanding. And so I think the best thing to come out of that movie was Sean Harris as Macduff. But here in this movie, I think everything is situated quite well for what some people have called just a strict recitation, and that is there a point for this to be told, for Macbeth to be told? And I think in an age, though, of entitlement, in an age of people circumventing power and usury, I think there is something to be said about a Macbeth told in these times. I think.
Well, I mean, what kind of, who says this?
Oh, reviewers.
Who says this?
Reviewers.
It's fucking Shakespeare. There's always time for Shakespeare, right? It's not like we're talking about, I don't even know what to do with that. That's fucking dumb.
Yeah, they're like, oh, is there a point?
Is there a point? Well, it's fucking Shakespeare, man.
I will say,
mean, you can like it or not like it. Yeah. Like, I'm not like, I'm a very middlebrow guy, right? Like, if this isn't your thing, I get it.
Yeah.
But like to say, like, is this the time? Well, what is it not fucking time for Shakespeare? They're running 17 Shakespeare plays around the world every fucking moment you breathe.
They do Shakespeare in the Park every summer,
but I'm just saying, like, people go back to this shit for a reason.
Yeah, yeah.
Like, it's not like this is. I mean,
well, I do find it interesting, Joel Coen in particular, because clearly he had a visual sense. So whether he was reading Macbeth and this is how he saw it, whether it was a collaboration of how do we want to interpret this. I mean, him and Bruno de Bonnel, who shot it, and he's worked with him before on Inside Llewyn Davis. It looks exquisite, and I feel like the craft and form here is actually accentuating the point. It's the sparseness of these, or the expansiveness of it, and how the characters sort of get lost in this aimless castles and these aimless places. So that there's nothing on the horizons. There's nothing of detail. And so I found that, like, what is the point? And I think it's a point of experimental form here for Joel Coen to get to the root of, what has inspired a lot of his characters or situations and in the tragedies.
Yeah, I mean,
that they
poisonous
like to,
ambition. Right?
Yeah.
Poisonous ambition.
Yeah, and I think that there is something truly artful, and maybe I feel like because of its not the sparseness in setting, but the sparseness, I feel like that because they do cut a decent amount of the text to make it efficient, to make it sparse, to make it quick. I feel like some things like maybe you don't agree. There's only slight hesitations I have with the movie. I think as a valid form of cinema and expressionism and telling this story, there's a point and there is a feeling to it that Joel Coen has connected to, and he is emitting that throughout every frame and throughout every dialogue exchange. But I felt like some of the more delicate transitions. If you see the play version, if you see the Macbeth the Roman Polanski Macbeth version, Lady Macbeth has a very quick transition in this movie. I feel like some of the sequences have been omitted, and I don't know if that's because you already know what's going to happen, therefore we don't necessarily need to articulate the casual sense and the decline into madness. But I felt like it was kind of quick, and I felt it underserved qualities of what Frances McDormand was bringing quite, fervently to the performance.
Yeah, there certainly is no ramp up to her ambition.
No.
Right? There is no on ramp to it. She starts that way and then she gets crazy. That's the only real transition. Is we get to the out damn spot stuff. Yeah, I mean it is stripped down in that way, but to me that just makes it incredibly well paced.
Oh no, it is exquisitely well paced.
This is just a strapped in kind of, and that to me just serves to accentuate the kind of just inexorable path to the end, right? Yeah. Which is just so like it's so delicious.
Yes.
Like from to the moment when they lop off his fucking head, I'm like, yeah, this was. Just,
it was a
walk
little,
out with it.
Was a little on the nose how overtly he was going for the crown.
Yeah, I mean, I just, and I found, like I said, even the fighting I found very satisfying. Like the fights, especially the penultimate fight, right, in the throne room.
Oh, it's not Macduff because he fights him on the.
Yeah, it's I forget that character's name. But whatever, it's just so well done. And it's like everything that I want an action sequence to be that you don't see in bigger movies, which is you just watch these two people just beat the shit out of each other.
I did like visually, you're right. The penultimate fight that is exquisitely choreographed, but also visually substantial. I mean, the forest in the background, with the foreground being the castle throne room. Again, this is such a well-crafted visual piece that it every frame I think gets just exquisitely burned into your mind.
Yeah, it feels like a fever dream. That's what it feels like, which is what ambition is.
Yeah.
And what Macbeth is meant to tell us about, right? Yeah. Is the fever dream of poisonous ambition, which, yes, as you say, is of course at the core of the Coens cinematic project, right? So, yeah, I mean, I went and saw this with my father-in-law, who's a painter, quite a good one, and he was extremely captivated by the composition of this movie. He gave it big thumbs up as someone who has spent his life thinking about sort of how to visually compose images.
Well, and again, it's like the visual composition aids in the rhythmic qualities of as we stated, Denzel Washington has a natural build. But what about the people who just kind of show up and are present? It almost accentuates their performance because it's part of the piece. It's part of this visual craft and what's being articulated in its visual sensibilities. Like at one point, it is just sort of there's some bleak humor, dark humor that when you watch the Tragedy of Macbeth, maybe on a play version, you might not necessarily get it. But who was it? The guy who plays Ross, Alex Hassel, shows up to talk to Macduff, and he's basically like, Macduff is like, how are, like, I'm not going to speak in Shakespearean because I am not that eloquent. I have not memorized it, but it essentially boils down to, is like, how is my family? He goes, well, when I saw them, they were fine. But I have reluctantly to report that since I saw them, they are now dead. How that scene plays out is so black comedy humorous that I was like, this is straight Coen brothers. Like, the rhythms of this, the rhythmic sensibilities of what is tragic at the heart of it, but is so awkward to be ventured.
Yeah, but it's also so Shakespearean, right?
Yeah.
Because you also get that great scene with Stephen Root, right, as the porter.
Stephen Root, I love him.
Who just pops in for one scene to do the kind of fool character.
Yeah, he's the porter.
And all these movies all the plays have humor in them because they were fucking long.
Yeah.
And people would watch them standing up.
Yeah.
Right? So you got to give them a little something.
Yeah.
Right? That's the thing about Shakespeare that's so interesting, is this popular entertainment, right?
Yeah.
These was not constructed as great literature. They were constructed as pieces of popular entertainment for people for fucking lunatic English people to hang out and watch and get crazy, right? And shout at the performers, right?
No, and I think Joel Coen has a keen. You're right. The Stephen Root sequence emphasizes the kind of foolish and entertaining qualities that are about what's happening on the sides of these things. I did find it so interesting that a lot of side characters were prominently featured in this movie, more so than the Macbeth and Lady Macbeth, who are the center focal points of drama, and yet they choose to venture the other people because they are the ones who are at the whims of this ambition. They're the ones who suffer. They're the ones who have to respond. And that is what's so interesting about it. And I like that he ventured some droll and bleak comedy with it. Another sequence was when it was quite funny. Oh, when Macduff's family is approached, they're like, you should probably go, they are on their way. Like, it's how they're told is in this, the inevitability of its tragedy comes off as also I mean, yeah, that's all that Lady Macduff gets, but it's so good. Yeah.
It's just and it's like everyone, that's the thing, is like, I just feel like this movie is a lot of great people really just hitting hard.
Yeah.
Right? Like, great people at every level just hitting really hard.
Yeah.
And doing really just top-notch work.
Yeah, I do have to say I was very, very impressed with Corey Hawkins as Macduff.
Great.
He's had a great year. I didn't love In the Heights, but I loved him in The Heights. He is emerging as a very, very quality talent that I'm excited to see more from what he does. Obviously, Catherine Hunter as the witch is exquisite, almost to the point where you want more of it. Like,
yes.
She is so
Although,
captivating.
I mean, that the final witch sequence is as good a piece of filmmaking as the Coens have done.
Yes. Yeah.
Like, I mean, and that's saying something, right? Like, that scene is just is great.
Yeah.
I mean, that's like everything I would want out of a piece of cinema.
Yeah.
That is in that scene. Just the surrealism of it, the acting of it, like everything, how it gets visualized, the little tricks they do where her face is in the water and then it's in the water in his hands. It's just, I mean, this is the thing, right? If you're this good technically, right, as well as being good at other aspects of filmmaking, and clearly the Coens are some of the best, right? And they get the best people to work with them, and they make great movies again and again and again.
Yeah.
Even the ones that aren't the best are still pretty good.
There's like a lull there where there's like two movies that are not really worth your time, but that's very rare in their circumstance.
And it's like, if you have time and you have money and you have expertise and you want to do something interesting visually, well, there's a whole lot of things you can do that aren't just like the same fucking action sequence, like over and over and over and over and over again, right? This movie does tremendous things visually.
Yeah.
And they work completely in the context of the movie.
Yeah.
They're pitch perfect.
Yes.
And it's just to watch someone who's, and they're visual effects, right? They're visual effects, probably done with computers, although I don't know.
Some of it.
I don't know how they did any of this movie visually. I don't know how they got this particular color scheme. I don't know any of it. But what I do know is that it's fucking great, and it's an example of all the interesting things you can do if you're really good and if you're creative, right?
Yeah.
Because
Yeah.
I mean, we see like nobody doubts like the technical prowess involved in capturing any of these action sequences that we see in all these forgettable movies. A lot of professional people doing a lot of good work, but it's fucking boring.
Yeah.
And I can't. And this movie is not boring. This movie is the antithesis. This movie is a cure for boredom.
Yeah.
And it just the way that the movie looks, I can't speak highly enough about it.
Well, and that is essentially like the reason, isn't it? Like, because Macbeth is a story, you've heard, you've seen renditions, you've seen all of these interpretations. And I think he just saw a purity of form and visual to accentuate it.
But also, I saw the other guy I saw was a real Shakespeare head, and he said, this gave me new thoughts about some of the lines and some of the readings and some of the ways I see it. So, and I didn't pursue the topic enough with him, and maybe I should have, but like, at least for him, this was like an invitation to sort of rethink
to rethink it.
To rethink it and to see it in new ways.
Well, I'll say this: I look forward to venturing it again, not only for its visual context, but also because of that. Maybe there are subtle interpretations of the lines.
Well, just the language does rush over you, and some of it is shall we say, easier to parse than others of it.
Oh yeah, I famously tell a story where I tried to venture Shakespeare in high school, and we were reading Shakespeare in high school, and I think we read Julius Caesar, we read Othello.
Yeah. They always make kids read Caesar, which is not one of my favorite plays.
No, not one of my favorites either. But I like Othello.
Othello, great,
quite a great piece. But obviously you read it in class and then you talk it out what is essentially meaning. You also have these designs to help you understand the language. But I took a dive into cinema, in the cinema realm, and I put on Kenneth Branagh's Henry V, which I think is actually one of the best Shakespeare adaptations ever made.
Definitely on the top tier of Shakespeare movies, which I would also put this Macbeth.
This would be
enters the top tier.
Yeah. This would
I haven't thought about how to rank them, but I'm just saying of the like great movie versions.
Yeah.
Branagh's Henry V is in that.
Is
in that group.
But in high school, my brain could not really venture it out. Like I tried. I think it was in sophomore year, maybe my junior year, and I put on Henry V. I had to turn off after 20 minutes. Because I was like, I just can't wrap my brain around what is actually being said. What are the political machinations and setups for this play? And so I eventually had to revisit Shakespeare when I was in college. And then I was able to really focus, really try and understand. And even to this day, though, I mean, it's so dense of dialogue and narrative that, it's difficult. It is a very difficult thing.
Well, I mean, they're horses for courses, right? I feel like the thing that's changed for me, and this is true with things I read, I guess I have the confidence now that I don't have to understand it all. Like if a line goes by and I don't know exactly what the character was trying to say, I just can't stay with it. Whereas when I was younger, I would get frustrated. I'd be like, I need to understand exactly what the fuck is going on.
Yeah.
And now I'm like, I know basically what's going on. You know, like if I'm reading a difficult text, I'll just be like, well, I'm not sure what that sentence meant, but I'm just going to keep on plowing through.
And I will say my sensibilities have evolved where I agree. If someone is articulating it visually, you don't necessarily have to read the words or hear the words. You could put some movies on mute and understand what's happening based off of the dynamics of visual interpretation.
But also, it's just like, I don't know. I think sometimes as a younger man, I deprive myself of certain things, or I didn't get as much enjoyment as I could because I was so intent to understand every last little thing.
Yeah.
Whereas, like, I mean, the Shakespeare stuff is a little bit different, right? Because there it's more about comprehending a specific form of English, which you kind of recognize, but is also kind of different from, like, what we're doing right now. Whereas in other cases, like, well, if a character's mumbling, maybe I'm not supposed to understand what they're saying.
Maybe not, yeah.
Right? Like, maybe the author in this book intended this sentence to be confusing and displacing, and to make my head hurt a little bit. Maybe that's the point. Maybe. Like, I don't know, you know.
Well,
I'm smart. If I don't understand it, well, maybe it's not there to be understood.
Yeah, maybe not. And I think that comes with a maturity of comprehension. You know, whether it's cinematic, whether it's literary, whether it's anything. You know, I think you can always find your way through these things. And I do have to say, this one ventures out its themes in clarity. I mean, it's as clear as the black and white visual and palette is. I mean, it is exceptional compositionally. It's exceptional visually. It's the performances are captivating in all the which ways, whether they are side characters, whether they are the forces at the center of it. You know, I have little complaints, you know, on interpretation, mostly because of the sparseness, the efficiency, but I can't necessarily chastise the efficiency. I almost like relish it comparatively to all of our experiences.
Codes. Yeah. Thank you, Codes, for not making us sit for 2.5 hours.
Yeah, not like an unabridged Macbeth 3 hour.
Thank you.
I don't think you necessarily get much out of that, do you? You get the same, I think, in the.
Well, I mean, also part of it is just like, how many more sort of interesting, you know, visual things do you have to do, right?
Exactly.
At 3 hours, does it sort of be like, okay, well, we've seen that shot before.
Yeah, exactly. So, no, I agree with you. I really, really enjoyed this. The longer I was away from it, the visuals crept in my mind.
Yes.
And because of that, the insidiousness of the poison ambition, as we talked about, also crept into my mind. What that thematically it was linked to how the visuals were captivating me, and I thought that as an exercise is a worthy entertainment ambition, and I thought Joel Coen did a magnificent job with Shakespeare, which is hard to do. I mean, even the last 10 years or so, we've had some pretty lackluster versions. Like, I love the play Coriolanus, but Ray Fine did a version of that. He directed it and starred in it as a modernized adaptation, and it just fell flat. And so the potential for this landing flatly, Shakespeare landing in a way that is not intended, is very easy. Yeah. So this is not a easy thing to accomplish. So you have to give him credit, whether it you think it has the same amount of poetry or you know, rhythm that it's supposed to have in other interpretations, other adaptations. I think this is an exquisite adaptation, and it's worthy of your recognition. It's worthy of your experience. I even put it on my top 25 movies of the year, and I think it's worthy.
Contender, yeah. This is definitely. I mean, I haven't thought about rankings yet, but.
And usually my rankings change over the years, but you know, it's just how I felt.
But I mean, this is
now.
This is really good. I'm just gonna say that this is really fucking good.
It's really good. No, it's excellent. So you should go see it. It's on Apple TV. I think starting 2 weeks or something like that. Someday, but it's in theaters, and I really highly recommend.
Oh yeah, go see it in the theater if you can.
Yeah,
100% go see it in the theater.
Yeah.
I think the visual impact of it is very impressive.
I agree. Well, I think. Do you have anything else to say?
I feel great.
Well, good. Well,
Happy New Year, everyone.
Happy New
Merry
Year.
Christmas, Happy New Year, Happy Holidays.
Yeah, because you're
wherever you celebrate. I hope it's great. I hope it was great, is great, will be great. If you watched this far, I love you.
Yes. Yeah. No, if you have watched this far, I love you too. Like, really, I do. I'm surprised. You know, I'm always surprised when people listen and watch.
Well, I mean, you're looking good. People
do.
They do it for the. We do it for the.
Do it for the.
For the looks, for the good, for the hotties.
Well, if that's bringing you, I also appreciate you for that. I guess you know. I don't know what we're gonna start in the new year. I know we've talked about. I mean, we'll obviously see some of the new stuff. We got the 355 if we want to see that. We got Scream.
That could 355 could be good.
Well, then we'll watch it.
Could be good.
We'll watch it. We'll bring you a review.
I like those actors. I like those ladies.
We got Scream. We got Morbius. We've got Cyrano. We got Cyrano coming out.
Cyrano's out there. We could
have, but it's coming out in wide on the 21st. It got pushed back by. It was out on at the Landmark, I think, for a week. I don't think it's many places. So we could do an early watch of that, but
it's everywhere.
But it comes out in January 21st, so I think we'll be seeing Cyrano. We might be venturing some catch-ups. I don't know. Maybe we'll review Don't Look Up.
Who knows what we'll do?
Who knows what we'll do?
I have no idea. I don't even know what I'm doing like right after you turn off the camera.
Yeah,
so I'm gonna pee. Actually, I know that. After that, though, all bets are off.
So we'll be coming back next year. We'll be continuing our journey, and we'll keep you up to date. We'll see these movies. We'll have conversations, and but otherwise, thanks for joining us, Ben. Dead Reckoner podcast. Kyle Bruehl. I know movies and you don't. Thank you. We'll see you next time.